Welcome to Networking RX, a podcast devoted to helping business professionals like you enhance your networking skills in order to become more proficient giving and receiving quality business referrals and improving the overall quality of your life and the lives of those around you. The Networking RX podcast is a production of AmSpirit Business Connections, an organization whose mission is to empower business success through networking.
As I shared with you a couple weeks ago, it was an episode where I talked about the amygdala hijack, and if you happen to miss it, it was released on March 7th, and it's episode 577. So go back and listen to that if you will. But in that episode, I was telling you I was going to bring somebody on, Trish Perry, to talk about her experience with that. Trish Perry is a certified master results coach, public speaker trainer, and she recently released a book, actually came out October 2022. She owns Harmonized Coaching LLC, and she helps professionals and executives who have been thrown off track by hardship, and she helps them to create successful, productive, and balanced lives, both career and personal. Her book is called Real, Raw, and Relatable: Corporate Badass Mom to Zen Mom, and again, came out in October 2022. It's available on Amazon. It's available on Barnes & Noble. So, Trish, welcome.
Thank you, Frank. It's good to be here.
All right. So just to let everybody know, Trish does not like mustard. She's a ketchup on her hot dog girl. I was reading your book, and it's like this story just kind of jumped out at me. I'm sure your husband, thank God he's still your husband.
32 years.
32 years. He was probably just blown away. So I'll let you share the story because nobody has context with it.
Well, so I need to back up a little bit.
Please.
This is when I lived in Louisiana, and my husband is from Louisiana. So we would go to New Orleans all the time and, party, have a great time. And then in New Orleans, after you party, you go to the Lucky Dog stand. And Lucky Dogs are hot dogs that are sold out of a cart. And I would say 95% of them only carry mustard. I only like ketchup on my hot dog. So I can't tell you how many times we had to walk for like an hour to find a ketchup cart, right? So that gives you the gist. And we get married and we're on our honeymoon, and we're on this lovely boat in the middle of Lake Tahoe. It was wonderful. And he said, "Oh, do you want a snack? I think I saw they have hot dogs." Sure. So he comes back walking so proudly with these 2 hot dogs, and I look down and there's mustard on the hot dog. Now, I just told you a story about the ketchup, right?
Yeah.
So, Frank, I didn't know that I was in amygdala hijack, but I went straight to amygdala hijack. It was, and that is you get to fight, flight, or freeze. And I was coming out with fighting words. Like, I can't believe that you would do this. I can't believe that you would get mustard on. It's like, it's okay. I'll just get another one. I was like, no, that's not the point. I mean, I was so dramatic. And I call that story Divorce Over Mustard. Because at the end of the day, I tied him bringing a hot dog with mustard to how much he cared about our relationship. Yeah. Now, we're brand new newlyweds. We had a wonderful time, and yet in that moment, he didn't love me. How does that happen, right?
Yeah.
And so as I got further into, I've done a lot of study in neuroscience with my coaching, and I was in amygdala hijack. Because I tied the mustard in our relationship, there was a danger. And it's when your brain thinks that you're in danger that the amygdala kicks in, cortisol and adrenaline are released, and you're in fight, flight, or freeze. And that's where I was.
Yeah.
But it's funny to talk about now. Wasn't so funny back then, but.
Well, I think if people listening are honest, they can relate. I can relate because I run into that all the time. I have to stop myself, take a deep breath, and say, am I telling myself a story? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Is this really that big of a deal?
Right.
And a lot of it comes from being hungry or being tired or being stressed, or there's precipitating causes, if you will. And in your book, you talk about other situations. The chapter No Stop, where you sent the email out,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yep.
I can relate to that, sending an email out, just being angry, and
Right. Yeah. So just so the audience knows,
please,
what Frank is talking about is, I was working, I was at Target.com at the time. I was part of the leadership team there, and we were getting ready to launch on the Amazon platform. And we were supposed to launch. It was 3:00 in the morning. We were supposed to launch at 8. We had 5 hours. Everything's going great. I got an email from Amazon that says, great news, we're gonna launch on time. We're just launch without search. Well, can you ever imagine launching a website without a search?
right.
It's just not going to happen, right? So
that's like getting a hot dog with mustard on it.
So 2 things. First of all, it was 3 in the morning. I had been up for more than 24 hours.
Yeah.
So I wasn't in my right mind anyway. And I'm thinking, there's no way we're going to do it. So my anger just got the best of me. I shot off an email to my boss telling her how ridiculous it was and who did they think they were, blah, 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 choice words, hit send. And at the same time, my heart stopped and raced because I hadn't forwarded it to my boss. I had replied to all, which was the Amazon team.
Yeah.
So again, we talk about that amygdala hijack. So here's the story I told myself. Amazon's going to call my boss. I'm going to get fired. I'm going to go home. My husband's going to want a divorce. He's going to get custody of the kids. And then if you remember the SNL skit, I'm going to be living in a van down by the river, homeless. Literally in 15 seconds, that's where my brain went.
Yeah.
And the amygdala does this number on you unless you can sit back, take a deep breath, get your prefrontal cortex back online, which is where your executive thinking comes from, right?
Right.
Get that online to do something. And I finally did. I was like, okay, you have a choice here. So I printed off the email. I ran my boss's office. My boss was the VP. In her office sits the senior vice president, and outside of her office stands the president of Target.com. And I've got to explain this horrible thing I did. I did. And here's the thing about failure. I did that. I went through all the steps and I said, as a matter of fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell my team what I did. And we're going to talk about, okay, what would you do in that situation? How do you make sure you don't do that so they can learn from my mistake? And my boss, Kathy, says, well, my boss's boss, Kathy says, oh no, Trish, I got you one better. I want you to talk to all of Target.com and I want you to tell us all what you did so that we can all learn from it. So
was that punitive? Was that punitive in nature?
No.
Okay.
No, it wasn't punitive at all. She truly wanted people to learn from it. Fast forward, I get my review for that year. It's the best review I've ever gotten. I got a big old raise. I got a promotion. And the biggest thing was that being able to take failure and learn from it and then lead from it, they felt like that was the sign of a good leader.
Mm-hmm.
And that would not have happened had I not made that failure, had I not made that mistake. So often we think failure is a horrible thing. It's part of the natural human learning experience. It's how we learn. We fail, we learn, we try again, we do better the next time. So anyway.
Well, Yeah, no,
Obviously, I'm passionate about it. So
no, but I think it's important. Again, it's, if this is a program about relationships, and the amygdala probably, I don't want to say sabotages relationships, like maybe in some cases,
it does.
But it certainly impairs them, right?
Mhm.
I've had blow-ups with my wife. I've had blow-ups with my kids.
Right.
My kids tease me, say I've got what's the concussion symptoms of past concussions, right? Because whatever it is, and I feel bad every time I do it. I remember once yelling at my kids, just clean the room or something like that, and I blew out my voice, but I had a speech the next day, so I had to fess up. I can't speak. I got to do it another time, and
because I yelled at my kids
yeah,
for cleaning their room.
yeah, right. Yeah, but again, like you say, you kind of tell these stories. If I don't tell my
Right.
kids, if I don't make them good citizens, then they're going to have a junkyard for a yard when they grow up, and that'll reflect on me. And I don't know what's going on in my mind, but it's something like this
Right.
that's so catastrophic. And you realize that's not the case. But what I found in your book is that they're also, I don't want people to think, okay, this is some crazy woman on here. Because I found in the book there was certainly evidence where you had a grip on things, and the story I relate to was chapter 28, where you had a boss who felt that one of your employees, one of his employees, one of the employees of the company, maybe the boss was a she, I don't know. It was a he. There you go. There's the common denominator right there.
No.
But he felt that, just as context, this person was coming to you and saying, listen, I got an offer from another company. I really want to stay here. This offer is much better. Is there something Target can do?
Well, it wasn't Target. It was
okay.
actually a different company, but
okay.
Yes.
And you brought that to your boss, kind of going to bat for your employee, because I assume you like the person.
Absolutely.
And the boss said, no way, no how. And then finally relented and said, okay, give in, but then we're going to fire him before he gets his bonus. Or we're not going to give him a raise. We'll put it in the form of a bonus. And before he gets the bonus, we're going to fire him.
Right. Absolutely. So it was really interesting. And his exact words were, I will not be held hostage.
Yeah. But his amygdala hijacked him. But what I noticed is you.
Absolutely.
And maybe it's because you're talking with your boss. You had a grip on yourself.
Well,
or
so a
didn't
couple
you?
of things. This was in June, right before I was getting ready to go out and have a double mastectomy for my breast cancer. So thankfully I had the wherewithal to say, he's coming to us because he would like to stay here. He's not coming to us quitting. And he said, well, he wants a raise. I'm like, well, yes, he does. And if we want to keep him, and he's a really good employee, it would be a good thing for us to do. And he said, I won't be held hostage, etc. So what I said to him was, that's not the way that I lead. I will not tell him, I will not give him a counter offer. You can do that. And I will not fire him in December. If that's what you want to do, then you can do that. But I'm going out on leave and you can figure that out. From that point, I went into my employee's office and I said, I'm just going to tell you that, let's call him Paul, is going to come to you with a counteroffer. And I'm just going to tell you right now that you need to do what you think is best for you. And that's all I'm going to say. And he said, message received. And he promptly quit. But it amazes me how we can treat people at work, in our personal lives, etc. It's just, and that amygdala hijack comes in so many times because, when we really break it down, Paul was fearful of his job because he had already had people turn over. He saw this as another arrow, if you will, And he reacted so quickly. And I talk to my clients about this a lot. You have a choice. When you're in amygdala hijack, you do have a choice. You can react. And that's that first response that wants to come out of your brain, out of your mouth. Or you can sit there, take a deep breath, count to 10, and bring your prefrontal cortex back online and decide, how do I want to respond to this? Because once those words come out of my mouth, I can't take them back.
Yeah.
They're out. I can apologize for it later. If you do it too much, though, it's like the boy who cried wolf, right?
Yeah.
So, that's one of my big things is, how do I respond versus react?
Well, and I find that personal experience is that when that hijack happens, it's a runaway train. It doesn't happen a little bit, right? I mean, it's spilled milk. It's everywhere. And you're right. Then you have to kind of backpedal. I had this situation with one of my franchisees. He came to me with a situation in one of our chapters, and he was kind of hijacked a little bit. And he's a very mild-mannered person. So, spilled milk is like a shot glass, right? It's not a whole gallon like me.
Right.
And I just told him, I said, well, Glenn, this is what I would have done, years of experience. But I'm going to tell you right now that there was a time years ago where, in working in our organization, I told a guy to F off. He just pushed my buttons, and rather than reasoning with him, I just got in his face and told him to F off. And literally before I could get to my car, headquarters was calling me saying, what are you doing?
Right.
So we're,
Absolutely. And Frank, we all have those stories.
Yeah.
And I would be very surprised if anyone in your audience couldn't say, or is not saying to themselves, oh yeah, I remember when I fill in the blank, right? And we've all done it. And we don't have to do it.
No.
Right? That's the cool thing about it. So I don't talk about it in the book, but I do talk about everybody has this assets triangle is what I call it. So everybody has it.
I'm sorry, asset triangle?
An asset triangle,
Okay.
ASSET. It's the three things that you can control in your life. There's a lot that we can't control. Stuff happens, right? You don't get the job. What do we normally think when we don't get a job? It was something that we did, right? I interviewed with a company. 6 months later, I didn't get the job. 6 months later, I found out it was because they gave the chief marketing officer gave it to her best friend. But I wouldn't have known that.
Yeah.
So I went down the path of, what did I do wrong? How could I have done better? I must have done something wrong because I got 10 interviews. It was great. And then I met with this woman and all of a sudden I'm not hired. What's going on? My fault, right? And it wasn't. So if you imagine a triangle, at the base of the triangle is your mindset. And that's our biggest asset that we have, is how do we control our mindset? Because if you sit down any of one of those situations and you look at what are the facts and what's the story I'm making up.
Yeah.
And when you look at it and you lay it out like that, it becomes really obvious that it's a story that you made up. And it's not based on facts, and it might be based on history, et cetera, but it's still a story, right? So you can control your mindset. The second piece that you can control are your actions. Okay, so what am I going to do? And then the third piece is your efforts. Because let's be honest, all of us have gone through the motion and we've done the actions, but we haven't put any effort into it, and it hasn't turned out well, right?
Right.
But if you put those three together in that triangle, if you change your mindset, you take the actions you need to, and you put your effort into it, you have nothing to look back on and say, oh, what could I have done better?
Yeah.
Right. And those are always available to you. So,
Well, and again, it gets back to controlling the amygdala, just kind of suppressing that, There's the amygdala hijack, which is that kind of that blow up, right? But then there's just the slow burn where we're constantly telling ourselves a story. We're not sleeping well, perhaps. You wake up or go to bed ruminating about not getting the job or whatever it might be. And that's still kind of the amygdala, the primitive part of our brain.
Right. And there's still cortisol and adrenaline coursing through our body, right? And our bodies were created to take short bursts of cortisol and adrenaline. And that's what helps us run away or fight or even freeze. And our bodies are not meant to be at that level constantly. And then that stress and that anxiety and all of that starts to build and build and build. That's where a lot of that comes from. But, that being able to control it. So your brain, actually your limbic system and your prefrontal cortex cannot be on the same level.
Right.
When one takes over, when the prefrontal cortex takes over, then the amygdala settles down. When the amygdala takes over, the prefrontal cortex is nowhere to be seen. And it's not a matter that you can do them both equally. It's one or the other.
It in my mind, it's like a Zoom call, right? Only one person can really be talking. And if another person's talking, then somebody's going to be drowned out. You can't have, it's not like a normal conversation where there can be little things going on. Yeah.
Well, and I look at it like, remember when we used to go on the playground and go onto those seesaws?
Yep.
And one's up and one's down, and it's constantly like that. So when you are in amygdala hijack, you need to think about the fact that somebody else is on the high end of that teeter-totter, and you've got to bring yourself back up. And so, like, there's one really easy way to do it. So and this is from his name is Shirzad Chamine. Positive intelligence. But if you take your thumb and your index finger and you very lightly rub them together, lightly enough that you can actually feel your fingerprint and the ridges in your finger, that's bringing you present. That's taking your limbic system down. And you can do that under a table when you're talking to somebody and you're really mad, and get present. And that's a really easy way to get back on track.
That's great advice. I mean, people say count to 10. Sometimes 10 is not enough.
Right.
And you can count to 10 really, really fast. And sometimes counting to 10 feels like a countdown. Yeah, right.
I know. One blast off, because there you go.
Yeah. So the asset triangle, mindset's on the bottom, and then action and effort are on the right and the left.
Yep.
Okay.
And there's a piece that I do want to bring up, and that is that people who are neurodivergent, so people with ADHD, people on the autism scale, etc., it's harder for them to do those three things. It is absolutely harder for them, but they can still do it. It's just practice and figuring out how to do it. So I work with a lot of clients who have ADHD, etc., and we work on that a lot.
Interesting.
But I did want to bring that up because sometimes we don't think about the neurodivergent people, and there is a difference. So.
Okay, let's shift gears here a little bit. Let's talk about your business, Harmonized Coaching, and types of people you work with. Well, you were a corporate badass. You were. You work. If you're working till 3 a.m., that sounds like my wife. My wife sends me a text, "Don't wait up." It's like, all right, I won't wait up. I'm a single. I'm single all of a sudden. My kids are all grown. I'm a single dad now, but that's a hard grind.
Yep. Yep.
That's all.
And so I started in a small department store down in Louisiana. Retail was my life. I went to Purdue, but also went to the Fashion Institute of Technology. And I went to Louisiana because it was the place that I knew I would never end up. And so I wanted just to go experience something new. Well, it was great. By the time I hadn't even turned 23 yet. I was the couture and the designer buyer, and I was going to Paris and London, and it was great. It was fabulous. And then I ended up at Limited Express back when that was like all the rage. And then Target came calling. And I went to Target and I stayed there for 20 years. And it was a wonderful 20 years. I'm telling you, it was great. In that I was at Target in the 90s when Target became an icon.
Yeah.
Right. So it was a great time to be there. And then I joined Target.com in 2000 when it was just a nascent business, and was part of the key leadership team that grew that. So I did a lot at Target, loved my jobs. I've had 6 different careers at Target. So
Right.
I've done merchandising, I've done marketing, I've done technology, I've done guest services, etc. Special projects. But it was when I was hit with a bunch of adversities that I left corporate. And I didn't leave corporate permanently. I won't go through it all, but I was diagnosed with breast cancer. I had a double mastectomy. A bunch of other adversities happened where my life turned into a country song, right? Mm-hmm. Minus alcohol, you could just sing about my life.
Right.
And then it ended with my sister dying of malignant melanoma, all in 9 months. And I left my job and I took 2 years off to do critical caretaking. And when I was ready to go back to corporate, I thought, I can't go back to corporate having quote unquote done nothing. So I went and got my coaching certification. But because I'm a hyperachiever, I got my mastery as well in coaching. And I was coaching a woman. I thought this was my last client that I would ever have. Mm-hmm. And she had a traumatic brain injury. And she came in, she was so excited. She's like, I got my job back at the school district and I feel so good. And what I thought was tongue in cheek, she said, I hope you know you helped save my life.
Oh my God.
And I said, well, that's just what I do. Again, tongue in cheek. And she just looked at me and tears started streaming down her face. And she's like, no, you don't understand. I hated my new brain. I wanted my old brain back and I knew I couldn't have it back. And I didn't know what to do. And Frank, it was at that moment that I finally listened to the universe, that the universe was trying to send me a message. And that's how I got into coaching. So it was this, I loved mentoring and managing, etc. And so it was the perfect marriage of that. So now I coach executives and professionals who have been thrown off course by an unexpected hardship. And it doesn't have to be cancer. It doesn't have to be death. It doesn't have to be that much of a loss. But think about the people who, they have a high-powered job, they have children they're taking care of, and now their parents have come of age where they're needing a lot of help. They have to move into assisted living, etc. Yeah. And all of a sudden, they don't feel like they're doing anything well.
Yep.
That's a hardship.
Yeah.
Right. So like I said, it doesn't have to be the big,
it's a challenge.
Cancer, what do I do?
Yeah.
But it's these amazing challenges that we have in our life. We end up being the sandwich generation, right? Where we've got parents and then we've got kids. And then we're trying to take care of ourselves and our jobs. And it gets out of proportion.
Well, it does. We're there right now. My father's 89, he's got memory issues, lives 12 hours away. My stepmom's is awesome, but still try to help her out. My father-in-law I joke that if we put my father-in-law and my father together, we could get a perfect human being because, physically my dad is great, but his mind and my father-in-law is sharp as a tack, but physically he's really challenged.
Right.
But it's just trying to deliver that care, and there's a dog, and then there's kids who are starting their lives, and you want to try and help as much as you can, and it's it's a
Right.
challenge.
Yeah, it is. And the thing is, and what I didn't realize is you don't have to do it alone.
Yeah.
And that's why I call myself a results coach instead of a life coach or a business coach or an executive coach, because it's about the reason you come to a coach is to get results.
Right.
And that's one of the things that I have 3 promises that I make. The first is positivity. So you'll always get the positive side of me.
Right.
The second is integrity. I always am true to my word, etc. And the third is results. So if we can't get the results in the time frame, as long as you put in 100% of the effort, then we will continue, and we'll continue at no cost until you get where you want it to go. Now, again, that depends on how much effort you've put in. I can't promise that to everyone, but I've done that with a couple of people. But my last year ended so wonderfully. I had a client who she was a managing director at a large financial company that I won't name. And they had asked her to interview for managing partner.
Mm.
And so we worked for 6 months to really get her to the level that she needed to. And the hardship going on with her was that she was comparing herself to this guy who she was interviewing against, and these comparisons kept coming up. And so we created for her a mindset of, what do I have to offer? Why am I the best choice?
Right.
Not why is he a worse choice? Why am I the best choice? No comparison. How do I work with him versus against him? On the 23rd of December, she got the call. She's one of a handful of female managing partners in a large financial firm.
That's good. Great story.
Yeah. And that, that was her hardship. And it's like, well, that's not a hardship. Well, for her, it was.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
No, I get it. Yeah. Yeah. It's, life is relative. I know that's kind of a cliched statement, but it's true.
It is. It absolutely is true. It absolutely is true.
Yep. Well, I appreciate your time. We've been talking with Trish Perry. She's the author of Real, Raw, and Relatable: Corporate Badass Mom to Zen Mom. You can connect with her through her website, which is harmonizeyou.com, or you can email her at trish.perry@harmonizeyou, that's the letter U.com, and I'll get the website link in the show notes. But I really appreciate your time, your insight.
Absolutely. Thank you. It was really fun. I appreciate it. Thanks for sharing your stories.
Thanks for joining us on the Networking RX podcast. Please put what you've learned into action today and let us know if you have questions, comments, or ideas for future topics. You can email them to us at podcast@amspirit.com. That's AmSpirit.com. Finally, so you never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe to the Networking RX podcast through iTunes, Overcast, or however you receive your podcasts. Now get out and network with someone.
The Networking RX podcast is the copyright production of AmSpirit Business Connection. All rights reserved.